So I've tried to make this video multiple times, so now I'll do it straight from the computer. And I'm going to address something that I think is one of the most repugnant things, and even more repugnant than maybe heavy-handed Catholics or the heavy-handedness of the Pope. Maybe being a bit too violent, or wicked opportunists seeking fortune and monetary gain while fighting these people. Even more repugnant than that, and that's not. I don't mean to endorse any of the violence or but I believe this to be totally depraved, which is Albigensianism, also known as the Cathars. The term Cathar, or Cathari, was used to describe various groups. People say, oh, see, it's the same group. No, it's not. The Cathars, when people say Cathar, it's confined to 11th, 12th, 13th century France, southern France, northern Italy, and parts of Spain. Particularly the Languedoc region of France, southern France. There was kind of a triangle of Cathar belief, of Albigensianism. Albigensianism comes from the word Albi, which is a town or city in France where this was a stronghold at. Many people today will try to link themselves to the Cathars, or say, oh, see, we go through the Cathars, or will make strange claims about the Cathars, but they have no idea. It seems as if they don't even know what the hell the Cathars believed, or the Albigensian heresy is. About the late 11th century, this started to grow. And also what happened is that the way to combat it was the Rosary the Western Rosary in its present form, something that I truly love. Now I only say the Hail Mary and sometimes the Creed in its Orthodox form, but I still think this is a great weapon, and that the Theotokos really did help out the Western Saint Dominic. Even though if there was some horrid consequences, and the Dominican order absorbed some of their practices. Now you'll be able to tell why the Rosary was so effective against this once I tell you their beliefs and practices. The Cathar heresy had much in common with the Bogomils, which was another Gnostic heresy at the same time. There's nothing to indicate that they were connected in any way. And the Gnostics, even within themselves, they don't claim to be have a succession from other people. What happened was that these people would be challenging it, the Catholic teaching in southern France. They would be they had hatred towards the cross and spoke out very vehemently against the cross, as you would know why a Gnostic would, and on any of the sacraments, any of the symbols. They were dualists. They believed in the demiurge and in the good God. So everything was evil. Everything in the material world was evil. And they were totally against marriage and the sex act and procreation. To this day, Gnostics will, when I get into debates with them, they will call me a procreator, as if it's a bad thing. They will call me a fornicator, and without even noticing that they themselves are perverted about sex, and it's not me. So the worst thing in the world is the sex act. Why? Because you are giving the body physical pleasure, and you're taking enjoyment in the physical world. And the outcome of sex is children, which is horrid to them. So a mother with child wouldn't be the beautiful sight that we see it as. It would be seen as the most wicked thing in the world. The idea of entombing souls into the body through a very, what they saw as a very carnal act. We see it as a blessed act in its proper context, but they would see it all as terrible. They encouraged suicide. Suicide was very noble for them. They would have this practice where these people would be the perfecti, the people who would undergo this one sacrament that they had, and then they would hasten death through starvation. So suicide was noble, and all the world that was material was evil. The idea that the spiritual is greater than the material may have effect on the material, but we know the material world was created by God. They would say it was by the demiurge. None of their sacred writings survive, but we know of their expounding of these things. There's not really much more than that can be said about the Cathars. Now, people claim that the Cathars believed in reincarnation. No. There was a group in Bath in the 1960s which claimed to be reincarnates a group of people claimed group reincarnation, and that they were the reincarnations of the Cathars. Well, why would a group of people who hated the idea of incarnation in any way want to be reincarnated? That would be the worst hell for them, right? These were people who believed that Jesus was an angel, that he wasn't born of a virgin, that he was he would, like the idea that he would walk on the sand and not leave footprints, that kind of idea, because he wasn't in the material world at all. Even though light is a particle and a wave, so it's very simple. If he was an angel, how did he, No, what becomes famous about the Albigensian heresy, or the Cathars, is that when the military campaign of stamping them out, one of the final acts was, because what happened was that the Pope called a crusade against the Albigensians, and he had done this after trying to resolve it peacefully. One of the representatives had a very loud argument with the Cathar bishop in the Languedoc region. The heresy had this kind of triangle in southern France, extending up to Albi, and it was in northern Italy and some parts of Spain. And they got into this very loud argument. This papal league had got into a argument with a Catholic bishop, and as soon as he tried to leave, he was murdered. And the Pope said, "All right, that's enough of this. We're not going to have this." It was a threat not only to the Catholic Church but to civil order in southern France. Now, people can whine and bitch and complain about how this was about the violence not being an issue, the good thing, but we're talking about medieval France here. This was not a friendly time. This is not lollipops and rainbows and little bunnies. This was a time of immense war, and especially 13th century, the 100 Years' War, and I believed even Occitan, which Michael Crichton bases a whole book about about the war in Occitan and between the English and the French, which this was a region fraught with violence, and that kicked off. So he asked Philip, the king, to enforce a crusade against these people, basically finding out who they are and getting rid of them, either expelling them from the country or asking them to repent. Well, he was busy, obviously fighting the English, so he said, "All right, you know what? He sanctioned anyone lower than him within the group to take this up." Well, opportunists took this up, and they went after the Cathars, and they did not do it for the right reason. They said, "Well, if we condemn them of Catharism, we can take their lands, and then we'll not only be lords in the north, but lords in the south as well." So many people, even the Catholics that had lived amongst the Cathars, were had seen this as a regional dispute and not really a religious one, because that's how some of the wicked people, who were just opportunists, waged it. Now, the reason how this became so powerful in fighting the Cathars is that Saint Dominic, the Western Saint Dominic, had basically solidified this in the form that it would stay in the 13th century. And he said, well, we need to be, since the Cathars are extremely celibate, they're fiercely celibate, and kind of have this revulsion to the world. Well, we have to be more humble than they are to show true humility against false humility, true piety against false piety. Well, in that, you're kind of acting like a Cathar, aren't you? I mean, that's a lot of my problem with monasticism, is how it acts. This is like a Bogomil thing. This is the Cathars, you know. This is the kind of a Gnostic way of doing it, you know. So I think there's kind of a danger of Gnosticism even within monasticism. In the West, it seeped in through the Albigensian heresy, and in the East, it seeped in of the Bogomils. The Bogomils still have this, or at least the effect of the Bogomils has a negative consequence within the church. I mean, toll houses. So the the reform, the peaceful way of getting rid of it really is the reason what it was gotten rid of. But the stamping out was basically the last stronghold of a place called Mount Segur. And when a knight asked the papal legate, how do we tell Cathar from Catholic? He said, kill them all, God will know his own. So you hear this today, kill them all, God will sort them out, kill them all, God will know his own. This thing. This is what was supposedly said by the papal legate, who I guess this would be a cardinal, right? That's if any Catholics watching this, isn't that a cardinal then? Now the Pope remained silent on the viciousness that was propagated against both Cathar and Roman Catholic alike, both Albigensian and Catholic alike, in these towns, but he also remained silent on the sacking of Constantinople, the murder of Eastern Orthodox Christians for monetary and material gain. But I still say just because the Catholics were heavy-handed doesn't mean that the Cathars weren't evil. I mean, people try to see this as a liberal form of Christianity. Really endorsing suicide, the hatred of sex, the hatred of the material world, believing that both sex and the bearing of children is wicked, that the world needs to be escaped. These were strict people. These were, this was an infectious heresy that, you know, if the liberals want, if the liberal 1960 hippie movement want to endorse sex and say, well, sex isn't wrong, that's a straw man against any Catholic Christian, any Orthodox Christian. But when they say, well, sex isn't wrong and free love, but we like the Cathars, they were against marriage. That must have meant that they liked sex. And no, they were against marriage because marriage meant sex. That's, I mean, even in the Bible, there was no ceremony. It says when a man and a woman come together, they are one flesh. They are married. So it's ignorance and trying to say that there's a reincarnation. And people who try to claim any connection with the Cathars, I would ask them, really? So you think everything in the physical world is evil? You hate sex, you hate the birth of children, and you believe suicide is a good thing, that you're going to hasten death, right? That try to pursue suicide, and that Christ was never incarnated, that he was just an angel of light. You know, they're like, no. I'm like, that's the only thing we know about them. Their sacred texts aren't left. We know that they had something called the Two Principles, a book called the Two Principles, a book called the Confession of John, or at least statements called the Confession of John, and the Two Principles. I think there was another one, but I'm not sure. So this really is repugnant. I despise Gnosticism, a dualist view towards God. Zoroastrianism, I think, is probably the only acceptable thing, but it's not Gnostic. Because I had seen something on the Unexplained. Oh, the Cathars, this and that. I'm like, are you kidding me? I've known about the Cathars for about 15 years. I originally known them as the Albigensians, but then started learning more about them, the Cathar. Now, there would be accusations of people being Cathars or this or that, but that's kind of like calling somebody Judas. Oh, they're Judas, or nobody themselves would espouse this. It's kind of like calling somebody an Arian. And in fact, the Albigensians were accused of being Arians, because that's the greatest heresy known. Like that's a bad thing. So that's Albigensianism or Catharism. And there's these stupid videos, and I'm like, are they talking about the same thing that I know the Albigensians to be, or the Cathars to be? How are they, whole reincarnation, and they were good people that were just in harmony with each other? They despised the cross, they despised the sacraments, they despised, these are people who had nothing but contempt and hatred for the material world. All is evil, it's all evil. These were the Jim Jones of the 12th and 13th century France. And yeah, opportunists did come down and take land or whatever, but does this mean that it's acceptable, what they were doing and what they were preaching, and encouraging suicide? So, that's it. Take it easy. Peace to you. My guts of Serbia and Syria. Have a blessed Christmas season. I believe now we're in the second day of Christmas. To 11th, 12th, 13th century France, southern France, northern Italy, and parts of Spain. Particularly the Languedoc region of France, southern France. There was kind of a triangle of Cathar belief of Albigensianism. Albigensianism comes from the word Albi, which is a town or city in France where this was a stronghold at. Many people today will try to link themselves to the Cathars, or say, oh, see, we go through the Cathars, or will make strange claims about the Cathars, but they have no idea. It seems as if they don't even know what the hell the Cathars believed, or the Albigensian heresy is. About the late 11th century, this started to grow. And also what happened is that the way to combat it was the Rosary, and the Western Rosary in its present form, something that I truly love. Now I only say the Hail Mary and sometimes the Creed in its Orthodox form, but I still think seeking fortune and monetary gain while fighting these people. Even more repugnant than that, and that's not. I don't mean to endorse any of the violence or but I believe this to be totally depraved, which is Albigensianism, also known as the Cathars. The term Cathar or Cathari was used to describe various groups. People say, "Oh, see, it's the same group." No, it's not. The Cathars. When people say Cathar, it's confirmed this is a great weapon, and that the Theotokos really did help out the Western Saint Dominic. Even though if there was some horrid consequences, and the Dominican order absorbed some of their practices. Now you'll be able to tell why the Rosary was so effective against this once I tell you their beliefs and practices. The Cathar heresy had much in common with the Bogomils, which was another Gnostic heresy at the same time. So I've tried to make this video multiple times, so now I'll do it straight from the computer. And I'm going to address something that I think, is one of the most repugnant things. And even more repugnant than maybe heavy-handed Catholics, or the heavy-handedness of the Pope. Maybe being a bit too violent, or a wicked opportunist.